Hi friends, today we're going to talk about making the big decisions. If you've ever been at that point where you have a big decision to make, whether it's between two options, three options, and it's just like you see the paths going forward in your life and you know that you need to make the right decision, but you're just filled with anguish and turmoil because all of them seem like decent options and you have no idea what to do, this is the video for you. Okay, I'm going to present 3 psychological tools that you can use to make this decision-making process easier for yourself and also potentially make the best decision for you. Because remember, there is no such thing as a correct decision. We can never ever prove that one of your decisions was the right decision. Even if we go towards like hindsight, at the end of your life, we look back and we say like, oh, okay, this led to this and this led to this. There's really no way of knowing because honestly, our lives are kind of like those like cards that people stack up and they all like fall in line with each other, or dominoes, they're dominoes. You know what I'm talking about, the dominoes that all fall. And one domino leads to another and who knows why that domino made that other domino fall. And so the first step to making good decisions is to realize that, you know what, we know very little. Like, we have no idea how things are gonna work out. Like, we don't really have control over this crazy thing called life. And once you realize that, it can be a little bit easier to make the big decisions. So now with that said, let me jump into the first tool that you can utilize to make decision making a little easier on yourself. So that is asking yourself, not what is the right decision? What are the trade-offs here? Blah, 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 things like that. You want to ask yourself, who is the person I want to be? And you think of that person, you really imagine that person. Maybe you write it out. Maybe you write out like, if I made this decision, I would be this type of person. This is the things I would think, I would do, I would say. And if I made that decision, this is the type of person I would be. I would have very different lives. And one of those might have a greater pull on you than another. And the reason I like this is because it allows us to see our decisions in a more holistic way versus kind of focusing on the tiny, tiny minutia that we tend to do that typically isn't helpful. Because honestly, a lot of times the hardest decisions that we make are often between 2 good choices. Because if one choice was so much better than another, it wouldn't be a hard decision. And because we have the human brains that we do, we want to optimize and we want to make the correct decision. But what we don't realize is that both of these decisions are good decisions. And that is a little bit terrifying because then it feels like we're leaving life up to chance. But if you consider, who is the person I want to be, there might be a little bit of enlightenment there that will allow you to move forward on one decision over another. Okay, so try that. And next, let's talk about the second kind of psychological trick that I like to implement when we're making the big decisions. And this has been referred to as fear setting. So it can be helpful to really consider, okay, if I make the wrong decision, if this doesn't work out, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I mean realistically. So I was just talking with a client today, and we were saying that if this kind of new role that he's going for in tech doesn't work out, that he might end up as a grocery bag boy at Walmart. Realistically, that's not going to happen. As someone who has a lot of experience in the tech industry, a lot of education, he'll get a job at another tech company. It just might not be as influential as his current job. That's the worst case scenario. And so think of a realistic worst case scenario. Will you be okay if that happens? And remember, oftentimes this isn't the rest of your life. This is just maybe a year, 2 years to kind of get yourself back up. And you can endure a lot more than you think. Remember that our happiness is actually often at a set point. So we know individuals who win the lottery actually don't end up happier after they win the lottery than before. At the same time, individuals who become paraplegics after accident oftentimes are just as happy after the accident as they were before. So should this kind of fearful event happen, you most likely will readjust. Your brain will readjust and you will kind of go back to your happiness set point. To some people, this can kind of feel like a little bit of a depressing mindset, but I find it really energizing. And I think it's actually a really optimistic mindset because we know that it's not the external environment that often makes us happy. It's kind of what's inside our own heads. Okay. All right, so think about it. What's really the worst thing that can happen? And oftentimes, if you really write this out and if you really dig deep and if you kind of repeat this fear setting exercise, what will happen is you will kind of get desensitized to the fear, which is important because when we first think of something, we often kind of have a shock reaction and it's very emotional for us. But if we write it out, if we externalize it, if we see it on a regular basis, we will often get used to it. And it won't be so scary as it used to be when we first kind of thought of it. Okay, so now let's move on to the third exercise, and this is my favorite by far. This is how I tend to make my decisions, and I think it's just the best tool to get rid of our kind of anxiety and fear, to kind of subtract that from the equation of decision making. Because personally, I don't want to make my decisions based on fear. I want to make my decisions based on the type of life I really want to create. I want to make my decisions based on the person I want to be. Okay, so for the last exercise, I want you to ask yourself the question, which decision would I choose if all of the paths that I have open to me worked out exactly the way I want them to? So like they all worked out just as I hoped, as I dreamed. They had the most optimal kind of trajectory. And this is the best mechanism to really subtract fear and anxiety out of the equation. Because if you think about your paths in this way, then you're really thinking about what is the best thing for me here, not what is my best risk mitigation strategy. And I'm not saying you can't make decisions based out of a mindset of risk mitigation, but that's kind of a whole different story. I'm assuming here that you want to make a decision based on life optimization. And so you really want to make the decision that you are most excited for. And it might also be the decision that you're most scared of. Those kind of tend to go together. And so if you take fear out of the equation, what would you actually choose? And this oftentimes is your path forward. All right, I hope that this video was helpful. This video was actually a response to an email I sent out to my subscribers asking, what do you need help with right now? And so many of you responded with, I need help with making a big decision. So I hope that this was helpful. And if you want to be on my newsletter list, I actually send an email out every Monday. It offers psychological tools, techniques, motivation, called Monday Motivation, that you can subscribe to just below. And sometimes I kind of ask my email list, like, what do you need help with? What are you looking for? So if you're hoping to get a question answered, just email me through my website or comment down below, and I will be happy to do that. All right, hopefully that this was helpful to you all, and I will see you all next week with another video.